Okay, here we are again. So, what we're going to be covering off today is a chapter called Work with Data and Audit Formulas. So, as you can see here, these are the skills we're going to be covering. So, skill number one is import data, advanced auto filters, which is going to be looking at filters and how you can filter data. We're going to actually be using filters on regular data, not a table, which we'll come to as we get into that. Sort, we're going to talk about the subtotal command, the trace and evaluate formulas, and the watch window we'll cover briefly. Just be aware that those tools are not available on a Mac. You will not be penalized in your grader assignment this week if you don't have the trace or audit formulas or the watch window active. They will be mentioned in the grader, but there's special comments in there around how you deal with that for a Mac. We're going to take a look at the very last of the what if analysis tools, so the one variable and two variable data tables. We're going to show you how you can create your own table style. Earlier we showed you how to create your own style for text. So you created that wine style, remember, so what have you. And finally, convert table to ranges, which is very, very basic. Now, a special note here, you can see here on the document that it's talking about the Office 365 and Office 2019 have replaced the get external data command with a tool called get and transform data, which is also available in Office 2016 and earlier, but has changed and has now completely replaced the get external data. This text or the grader and the lesson were based on the old get external data command, so you cannot use the get and transform option to complete the grader this week. Now there is a link here in this Excel spreadsheet that you can click on if you want to get further information on get and transform data, which is actually quite a powerful command. But for this, you will actually have to modify your system to be able to use the old command. So to do that, there are written instructions in Fanshawe Online, but for now, so again, what you should be doing, sorry, before we get started on this, you should have the EXL07 classes file, which is where you can see all of this stuff that I'm talking about right now. You will also download a file called EXL07_classes data. What will happen in Fanshawe Online, when you click on it, it will display the data. You're going to right click, save image as, or save as, and save it to your desktop or your downloads folder. So once you have the Excel open, let's go through how to add the get external data command back into Excel. To do that, you're going to click on the file button and you're going to go down to the options button. And these are the Excel options that you can use to modify the basic setup for Excel. We're going to click on the data tab. And at the bottom of that, you're going to see something called Show Legacy Data Import Wizards. And you're going to put a tick box in the From Text Legacy, which will allow you then to use the old Get External Data tool in Office 365 or Office 2019. Okay. Now, you can see here in the graphic that I've got on the screen here, or in Excel, this is what it should look like. It should, when you click on the data tab, you should see get external data. If you don't see that, then you're going to have to install it the way I've just talked about it. If you can see that command, the get external data, that means you're running on a Office 2016 or earlier version of Excel, and you are fine. You don't have to make any changes. Okay, so let's get started. So skill number one is importing data from a text file. So you're going to click on the classes table or classes worksheet, and you're going to click on cell A6 is where you want the data to be imported into. So to import data in, so again, once you've created all of the linkage, so I'm going to click on data, and if you, as I said before, if you can see the command that says get external data, you're just going to click on it, and if you have a newer version, you're going to click the arrow under get data, and you're going to go down to Legacy Wizards, and you're going to click on From Text, which will then bring up the old text wizard file. So it's going to ask you for the file. So my file is on my USB drive, and it's in here, and it's in here, and it's in data and audit formulas. and there's the file EXL07 classes data. So you would just simply go to wherever you had downloaded that file, either your downloads or your desktop or wherever you put it. When I bring up that file, I'm going to bring up what is called the text import wizard. So the text import wizard is composed of 3 different steps. So what the text import wizard allows you to do is to bring data in from an external source. Quite often when you're working with an Excel, the source data that you need to work with is available someplace else. It could be in another folder, it could be in a database somewhere, your IT department might provide it for you, you might have it sent from a third party, from external third party. However, whatever way it comes in, you need to get that data into Excel. One of the most common ways of sending data to other users is something called a CSV file, comma separated value file. And understand that in Excel you can open a CSV file directly into Excel. You don't have to go through the text wizard or anything along that line. It will simply open the file and it will be available to you in Excel. There are certain circumstances when you don't necessarily want to do that, and we're going to talk about that as we go through here. The primary reason would be is that when you bring in a file from an external source using a CSV file, Excel will determine by the contents of the cell what type of data that is. So if it's just numbers, it'll treat it as a number. If it's got any sort of letters in it, it'll treat it as text. And if it's a date, it'll treat it as a date. Most of the time, that's going to work fine. And the only circumstance that I've ever seen where it's been a problem is that sometimes people will use numbers as identifiers. And let me give you an example. I taught a course at the police department, and what they were looking at there was using cell phone data. So they would go to Rogers or Bell and they would pull the history of a particular user's usage, and then they could be able to track their usage by cell phone towers. So they could actually track how somebody is moving around the city by using, when their cell phone is on, it's going to certain cell phone towers, and so they could track all of that. The cell towers are identified by a numeric indicator. The problem with it is that in the cell towers, they may have a cell tower that's identified as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you bring the data into Excel using just as a CSV file, Excel will drop that starting 0, because a 0 in front of a number is meaningless, so Excel would drop it as a number and it would just show as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we were trying to do a VLOOKUP on the cell tower, we were looking for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We couldn't find it in our data. So what we had to do was go back and change our import so that it imported that cell tower information as text so that the 0 would stay. The other value of using the text import wizard is you can decide which columns you want to import. And the other problem would be if you have dates. Sometimes the date formats might not be what you're expecting. So in the import wizard, and I'll show you in a second, you can actually determine the date format of the incoming data. Okay, so the very first screen of the text import wizard shows how is the data that's coming to you delimited. So how do you determine where one field stops and the next field begins? 99.9% of the time it's going to be a delimited. So there's going to be some sort of a character in the import data that identifies that this is the end of the first column and the start of the second column. Occasionally you might use fixed width, in which case you need to know how that data is coming in. Down here you've got the ability to say start import at a particular row number. So if for whatever reason the data is being, let's say you're scraping it off the web or something along that line, you might have 5 or 6 rows of garbage before your data actually begins. You could actually determine that here. You could have, if your data coming into you has headers, so if it's coming in from a third party and the first row is all of the different headers and then the data starts in the second row, you would turn on this indicator so that it wouldn't treat your headers as part of your data. In our case, we don't have to worry about it. Down below in here you can see in the preview of the data, it shows what sort of data is coming in. So I'm going to click next. Now in this case the data internally is separated by a tab, and that's very common to use a tab as your separator when you're bringing in data. If it was a CSV file, then the data would be separated by a comma. So if I turn off tab and click on comma, now you can see in the data preview that my data is no longer broken down into columns because it's not using a comma, it's using a tab. So I'm going to turn that back off and turn the tab back on. So when I look at my preview, I can see that the first column is the course, the second column is the instructor, and so on and so forth. I have the ability to modify up here. I could say if there's a separate, if a different something is being used as the separator, of course whoever's sending you the data would have to tell you that, so you can fix that. So I'm going to click next. Now this is probably the most important of the three. This determines how the data is going to be treated in Excel. So you can see in the data preview below it says each column is identified as general. So what general means is that Excel is going to decide. So if it's got text in it, it will treat it as text. If it's no text in it, it'll treat it as a number, or it'll treat it as a date. So in this case, you can see the first column is general, the second column is also general, and this is in the third, the fourth, and the fifth. If for whatever reason I wanted to change something, I could click on the column and I could say, no, treat it as text instead of treating it as a number. Now the downside to doing that in this particular case, I do want these to be numbers. If I treat it as text, I wouldn't be able to do any sort of math on it because it's not a number, it's text. So in this particular circumstance, I'm going to turn it back to general. You also have the ability, if you've got dates coming in, you can determine what the date format is. So if it's year, month, day instead of month, day, year, if it was coming in from Quebec as an example, I would change the date format to year, month, day. And the final option that I have is do not import a column. So if I don't want a particular column, I can click on the column and turn that column off so it's not imported. Now understand, I could still just bring everything into Excel and then delete the columns that I don't want, but sometimes it's nicer to have that all done before it gets brought across. Okay, and then I'm going to click finish, and it will say where do I want the data. So I started by clicking in cell A6, so that's where I want the data, but if you hadn't, you could then determine where you want that information to be and just click on it, and I'm going to click OK. All right, so now the data import is complete, and we're going to I just want to take a quick look at something here, because this is a circumstance that I'm just going to use as a reinforcement on the VLOOKUP function. If I click on this cell here, you can see that this is well, let's take a look at the data. So the first column shows all the courses that are being offered by the recreation department. Who's going to be teaching that course? What are the course fees? So in other words, this course is costing $119 per person. What's the capacity of the course? So that it'll hold 15 people. How many people have currently signed up for the course? So in this first row, you can see that it'll take 15, 14 have signed up, so I have one available space. Now, if I take a look here at income of course is simply going to be the fees times the number of people who've decided to take the course. So it's going to be 14 times 119. Finally, I'm going to look at this thing called instructor fee. Now, instructor fee, you can see up on the formula bar that is actually a VLOOKUP, and it is looking up the instructor's name against a lookup table on the lookup. We're going to come to that in a second. And then it's going to pull off column 2. And the important component here is that it is not identified as an exact match. Excuse me. So I'm going to simply highlight this so that I can show it to you. There's my VLOOKUP function. So it's looking up the instructor's name and it's looking it up in this table. Okay, so on the lookup table, it's looking it up in here. One other problem that they've done here is they've actually included the headings, which they probably shouldn't have. They should have started in column 4, in row 4 instead of row 3. Then it goes out and picks up the instructor fee. But notice that range lookup is left empty. Range lookup says if it's the word false, then it has to be an exact match, and if it's true, it has to be an approximate match. So this is set up as true. In other words, it's an approximate search. The problem with that is, if for whatever reason there was no Kate Mansberger in my lookup table, an approximate search is still going to find a value. It's going to find the next closest one to Kate Mansberger alphabetically. So it's going to find whoever the next K is. And of course that's absolutely, completely wrong. Because what happens here is that if Kate Mansberger was not in that lookup table, I don't want it to find the next approximate one because that's bogus. What it should do is it should return an error message that said, hey, your lookup table doesn't have a fee for Kate Mansberger. You better fix that. All right, so I'll show you an example here. I'm going to cancel this. So I'm going to leave it with the approximate search. I'm going to go to my lookup table and I'm going to delete the row that has Kate Mansberger in it. So just so you go through, what this is saying is that for each instructor, here's how much you're charging per person. So Kate Mansberger is charging $10 per person. There's 14 people in that course, so it's $140 that they're going to pay to her for this to teach that course. If I delete this row and then I go back, well, this is still finding a fee. Now remember, before it used to be $140, but now it's finding $630. But there is no instructor fee for Kate Mansberger. This should be showing an error. So what it should be, I'm going to click on here and I'm going to say false. And that's exactly what it should be showing. So the important learning here is that when you set up a function, you must be careful that you can look for any possible opportunity or action in the future. So whoever set this up, it worked because they had a fee for every instructor in that list. So it did find Kate Mansberger, so it showed the $140, the 14 people times 10. But the problem here is that they didn't look into the fact that it could change in the future. You could have added a new instructor, forgot to put him into the lookup table, and your spreadsheet would still work, but it would give you invalid information. And something like that can be devastating to an organization, because in this particular case, they would have said, okay, well, we have a fee for Kate Mansberger and it's showing $640. Well, we may not want to run that course because we're not making that much money. On the other hand, if they had Kate Mansberger at $10 a piece, it was $140. That's a significant difference in their profit and so on within the organization. Okay, so I'm going to go back and put Kate Mansberger back in here. Hopefully I spelled it right. $10. Go back to my full, and voila, it shows up again. Okay, so and this was the actual file that you've got from IIT Lab. From the textbook. So whoever wrote this example made what I would consider to be a fairly glaring error that could be very costly down the road. Okay, so enough of my sermon preaching there. Skill number 2, we are going to, well, before we do that, let me just take these values here. Right, so this is the available, which is the capacity minus used. This is my income, which is used times the course fee. This is my instructor fee. Notice on the instructor fee what they've done is they've gone and looked up the $10 per person, and then they've multiplied that by the number of students to come up with the total instructor fee. And my profit and loss is simply my income minus my instructor fee. Okay, so I'm going to highlight those and I'm going to carry them down through the whole data. Okay, so there's all my values down to the bottom. We're good to go. So skill number 2 is apply advanced auto filters. So the first thing to understand is, and remember we talked earlier on, I think it was in the week just before the test, we started looking at tables. And tables are a very special construct within Excel that allow you to manipulate blocks of data. And internally within Excel, it treats a table as a very small database. Now, this data here is not a table. However, we can still take advantage of some of the features of tables. So remember what happened with a table. When you created a table, it gave you the ability, it put little filter buttons beside each heading. which gave you the ability to sort data, to filter data, and so on, which we're going to come back to in a second. A table also gave you the ability to add a total row, which we cannot do in this information because it's not a table. And a table also gave you the ability to use what is called calculated columns, which would be when you did a formula, it would automatically use the name of the column for the formula, and when you created a new row in the table, it would automatically carry that formula down, which does not work in non-table data. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to turn on the filters so that I can do some of the functionality of a table on this data. To do that, I'm going to go to the Data tab, and I'm simply going to click on the filter. So click on cell A6. Probably should work if I click on cell A5 as well. Yes, if I click on A5 or A6, it automatically adds the filters for all of the row headings or the column headings. So the filters are these little arrows that you can see at the edge of each cell, each column heading, and that filter applies to the column from the very top down to the bottom. So it'll go all the way down to row 75. Okay, so we're going to click on A6. Oh, we've already done it. So we're going to click on instructor. We're going to click on the filter here. And what a filter allows you to do is I could sort the data. So I could sort alphabetically, A to Z, which is increasing, or Z to A, which is decreasing. I could sort by color, in which case there is no color here, so it wouldn't work or wouldn't matter. I can apply text filters, and filters allow you to pick certain values within the table. Or I could simply turn on and turn off the ones that I want to see and I don't want to see. So what happens with a filter is that when you turn on a filter, it will select the data in the I'm going to call it a table, even though it's not physically a table. But it's going to select the data in my range of data here that matches the filter. Okay, so in this case they want us to create a custom filter that shows row equals Jules Casarillo or Lisa Render. So I'm going to click on text filters, and I'm going to click on equals, and you can see here it's a custom auto filter, so it's going to say equals Jules Casarillo or equals Lisa Render. Now understand, I have to use or, not and, because if I had and, then the value would have to be both Lisa Render and Jules Casarillo, which of course would return 0. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And you can look over here on your column, on your row headings. You can see that I go from 5 to 55, 61 to 76, and so on. So what a filter does is it simply hides the rows that do not match the filter. So all of the other instructors are still there, they're just hidden. You can't see them. Okay. Now I'm going to add a second filter for course fees that are greater than or equal to 50. So I don't want to see this one or this one or this one. I only want to see the ones where the course fee is greater than 50. So I'm going to click on course fees, number filters, greater than or equal to 50. Okay, so now the only values that are showing, so I've got 4 rows of data where the instructor is either Jules or Lisa, and the course fee is 50 or more. All right. So now I'm going to select all of my data. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go to this filtered table or filtered worksheet, and I'm simply going to do a paste. All right, so why did I do that? If I take a look at my original data, you can see that I go from row 5 to 57 to 58 to 59 to 60 to 76. Okay, so in effect what has happened is the unfiltered data is still there, it's just hidden in those rows. It's hidden the rows that don't match the filter. When I did the copy and the paste, however, it got rid of the unfiltered rows. So now I go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The unfiltered rows are no longer available in this particular worksheet. So this is a very common practice in Excel. I've got my original data sitting here in the classes worksheet, and I could go back to data and I could clear the filters, and there's all my data shows back up again. So when you're dealing with a large amount of data and you only want to work against a subset of that data, what you would usually do is select the subset of data on your original data and then copy and paste to another worksheet so that your original data is not touched, it's still there, and I've got my filter data that's separate in a different location. Okay. So now we're going to filter the course looking for text that begins with basic. So I'm going to go to the filter under course, and I'm going to go text filters, begins with basic. And notice that I'm typing it in lowercase. Filters in Excel are not case sensitive. So if I type in basic or all uppercase or capital B in lowercase, it doesn't matter. I'm going to click OK. So there are the courses that match my filter. So I'm going to select my headings and the data. I'll just select this way here. I'm going to do a Control-C for copy. I'm going to go to the filtered data. I'm going to go to row 11. I'm going to do a Control-V to paste. So now that I have my data, I'm going to go back to classes, and I'm going to turn the filters off, which will give me back my original data. Okay, so that is basically skill number 2. So skill number 3 is sort dating using conditional formatting. So I'm going to click on I6, and I'm going to do a Control-Shift down arrow. Right. Now again, Control-Shift down arrow is no different than clicking on I6, dragging down to the bottom. It just is a faster way to select a set of data. Control-Shift down arrow will simply select from wherever cell you're on down to the very bottom. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add conditional format. So remember we talked earlier about a conditional format. A conditional format is basically you create a rule that says if a cell matches the conditional formatting rule, then do whatever the conditional formatting is telling you to do. We used this before when we did I don't know if it was something about community gardens and rakes and all that sort of stuff. But we did on a particular column, we said show me every number that is bigger than a certain number in one color, anything that was between two numbers in a different color, and everything that was below a number in a third color. So you can do multiple conditional formats on a set of data. This does bring us up to a point. If you create a conditional format and screw it up, you must go in to, and I'll show you in a second how to do this, go in and delete that before you fix it, because otherwise the original mistake will still be there. Because conditional formatting, you can have 100 different conditional formats on the same set of data. So if you mess it up 15 times, all 15 of those are still going to be there. So that will cause you a problem when you go to My IT Lab to have it graded, because it will find possibly the incorrect one and mark it based on that, even though you've fixed it by creating the proper one. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to go to the Home tab, and I'm going to go to Conditional Formatting, and we're going to create an icon set. So we're going to go down here to Icon Set. We're going to use the default. Well, let's see here. Are we going to? Oh, we're not going to do it from here. We're going to go down here to New Rule. So we're going to create it from scratch. So I'm going to go to New Rule. I'm going to go to Icon Sets. The default icon sets are the 3 stoplights. So remember, we've looked at this box before. I can reverse the order if I want the largest number to be, or the smallest number to be green as opposed to the largest number to be green, and so on. In our case, however, I don't want to use the percentages here. So remember, by default, when you create a conditional format, it will take a particular number and it will look at that number in comparison to the largest number in the range of cells. So right now we're looking at our total profit and loss on a course, and we're saying how does this particular course profit and loss compare to the largest number profit and loss within the whole range. And what it will do is if it says that the current number is 67% or bigger of the largest number, I'm going to put a green circle beside it. If it's between 33% and 66% of the largest number, I'm going to put a yellow circle beside it. And if it's less than 33%, I'm going to put a red one. I don't want to use those. I want to create my own, and I want to do it based on a value as opposed to a percentage. So to do that, I can simply click on where it says percent and change it to number. So right now for the green number, I'm going to say I only want green courses that are producing at least $750 in revenue to show with the green circle. And for the yellow, I want anything that is at least 0. And anything where I'm actually losing money on the course, I want it to have the red circle. So by setting up my own numbers, I can actually modify this to be something that's more representative of what I want it to show. I'm going to click OK. OK. Now I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm going to go to the Data tab, and I'm going to click on Sort. Now when I click on Sort, basically what I'm trying to do is I want to sort that column of numbers that I have highlighted. But what Excel is now telling me is you're trying to sort one column out of a whole set of numbers. If I just sort that one column and don't sort the numbers that are pertinent to it, then my data becomes useless, because now the number in profit and loss doesn't actually match the course that it belongs to. So all this is saying is that even though you selected that column, you probably want to select all of the data, which is what I want to do here with expand the selection. I say yes, which then brings us up into the sort dialog box. Now in the sort dialog box, I have a number of options here. Right now, I'm sorting this particular column, so I'm going to sort my profit and loss. Normally it's going to say sort on values, so I could say sort smallest to largest, which would have my least profit up to my most profit, or I could reverse it and have my most profit down to my least profit. But in our case, we actually are going to sort it by conditional formatting icon. So we want to sort it by the icon. And if you don't see this, it means you're running with an older version of Excel. Then you're going to, instead of sorting it by the conditional formatting icon, you'll sort it by cell color, or by icon color. So I'm going to say yes, and I want my red ones to be on top, because I want to see the courses that I'm actually losing money on sorted to the top, because we're going to do something around that. We're either going to cancel the course, or we're going to put out advertising, or change the value or the course cost, or something, because we don't want to be running courses where we're losing money. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. All right, okay. And I'm going to select A1. I just want the losing courses, and I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to go to my loss worksheet, and I'm going to paste that here, because we're going to do something special with these particular courses, I'm assuming. Okay, we're going to go back to cases. I'm going to click the escape button, which will actually get rid of my border. And I'm going to sort on the courses column by A to Z. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to go to sort. I'm going to sort by course, and I'm going to sort cell value A to Z. So now all my courses are sorted alphabetically. Okay, so that's skill number 3. Skill number 4, we're going to be sort data using subtotals. So subtotals, well, let's work through it first. So on my data, I'm going to sort by instructor, and I don't have to use a sort box if I'm only sorting a single field. I could simply click on the A to Z or Z to A. Let me just explain here what this does. The sort box also gives you the ability, let me go back a second here. If I click on a cell and I click on the sort box, I've got an option here called sort A to Z or sort Z to A. That will sort all the data by that one column, either alphabetically ascending or descending. However, sometimes, as an example, I may want to say I want to sort by instructor, and then within the instructor I want to sort by the courses that they're teaching alphabetically. Another example might be if I've got human resources data for all of my plants across Canada, I may want to say, all right, now put all my London plant together, and then within the London plant I want it by department, and then within the department I want it alphabetically. So I'm actually sorting in 3 different levels there. I cannot do that with the single button. If I click the sort A to Z or Z to A, it's just going to sort the whole table based on the column that I'm in. If I did want to sort the other way, I would have to click on the sort button, say I want to sort by instructor, but in this case I actually want to sort by no, we'll leave it with instructor. I want to sort by instructor, and then if within the instructor I want to sort it alphabetically by the course that that instructor is teaching. So I'd have Angela Miller, and then within Angela Miller alphabetically I have all the list of the courses that instructor is teaching. So now I've had actually 2 levels of sort. If I was doing the other example I'd said, I would have said I want to sort by plant, and then I want to sort internally by plant, within plant by department, and then a third one within department by last name, say, and then I would have the data sorted that way. So that's called a complex sort because it's sorting on more than a single field. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to have a subtotal show up under each instructor. So at the end of Angela Miller, when it changes from Angela Miller to Ben Fitz, I want to total up how much my total profit is for that instructor. I want to look at, I could say look at my average instructor fee or what have you, but we're just going to look, we're going to add up the instructor, the income, the instructor fee, and the profit and loss column. So what a subtotal does is it provides a subtotal when a certain field changes from one to the next. It's no different than if you're in the checkout line at a grocery store and you want to say, these first 10 items are for me, the next 10 items are for work. So I need to know of the total amount of the groceries, how much was my own personal one and how much belonged to this other group. So the important thing with the subtotal is that you have to tell it, you have to first sort the data by the field that you're going to subtotal on. Because what Excel will do is every time the subtotal, this field that you're subtotaling based on changes, it'll throw out a subtotal. So if I don't sort the data first, if I didn't sort this data by instructor name alphabetically, then every time the instructor name changed, it would put out a subtotal. And if the instructor names are all over the place, I could have hundreds of subtotals in my data. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to select my data. Okay, so I'm going to go to my data tab, and I'm going to go to subtotal. And what subtotal will do, it'll select all my data, and then it says at each change, right now it says at each change in course. So that means that every time the course name changes, it's going to put out a subtotal. But that's not what we sorted our data on. We sorted our data based on the instructor name. So I have to change that to instructor. And I want a sum, so I want to have it total particular columns, and I want to total my income, my instructor fee, and my profit and loss. I click OK. Okay, so as you can see, now what I'll have is I have at Angela Miller, when it changes from Angela Miller to Ben Fitz, it puts a subtotal on the 3 fields that I told it to subtotal. And I also get down the left-hand side of the screen outlines. And what the outlines allow me to do, so if I click on the 1, you can see that it shows just my grand total. If I click on the 2, it'll show just the subtotals. So there's the Angela Miller numbers and the Ben Fitz and so on, but none of the detail. I do have the ability to click on one of the plus signs over here on the left to open up that particular subtotal to show the detail for that subtotal. Okay, so what you can do with this, I used to use this a lot when I was doing budgeting, because in my budgets, my managers, one second here, okay, my manager would only want to see the totals. He didn't want to see all the detail. But if for whatever reason they had a total that they didn't agree with, or they wanted to know more information about, they could go to that total and click the plus sign to bring it back up again. All right, so if I might have departments for all my different plants, for the different departments within those plants, for the utilities, personnel costs, deductions, whatever, that I would say bring all the data in and subtotal it, so that then I could just simply look at the subtotals when I needed to. So that's basically what subtotals allow you to do. In a couple of weeks we're going to look at pivot tables, and pivot tables are just like a very, very high level way to do subtotals. So, okay. All right. Okay. It has you copying the spreadsheet, but we're not going to bother. We're going to just move on to skill number 5. So skill number 5. Well, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back in here to subtotals, and I'm going to remove all my subtotals to get back to my base data. Okay. All right. So skill number 5 and skill number 6 are trace and evaluate formulas and audit formulas used in the watch window. As I said earlier, these two commands are not available on a Mac. They are only available on a PC. What they are used for is that sometimes you have very, very complicated formulas that we're pulling data in from a lot of different locations. If you were doing budgeting, or you're looking at your profit and loss for a business or what have you, the final end number, the profit or loss that you have, is based on think of your own personal budget. So if you're doing a budget to keep track of your expenses, you're going to have all of your incomes, so your salaries and commissions and tips and money from mom and dad, and all of those sorts of things are going to be adding into your income. And then you're going to have all your expenses, your rent and your beer money and entertainment and clothing and so on and so forth, textbooks, whatever. The final result is your total income minus your total expenses to give you your final number. So you may have, in a business, you may have thousands of items that are adding into your profit and thousands of items that are adding into your expenses that are then coming down to a single number at the bottom that says you're going to make this much money this period, or you're going to lose this much money. So sometimes those calculations are spread over numerous different worksheets to build those formulas to finally get you to that bottom number. Sometimes when you get to that bottom number, you've got a mistake and you don't know where the heck it showed up. So what trace precedence and what trace formulas does is allow you to click on a formula and trace what fields fit into that formula, and also to trace where that particular cell, what cells it feeds into. Okay, so we're going to click on G6. So that formula is equal to C6 times E6. So it's basically my course fee times the number of people that are taking the course. All right, so in this particular course, my income is $429 because I have $39 I'm charging per times 11 people. Okay, so I'm simply going to change that formula to say A6. So A6 is the heading, so what I'm going to end up with is an error message in my formula. Now, again, this is very simple. I could simply click on the formula and say, oh, well, that's screwed up. That's, why. But you do have the option in the, where is it here? It's Formula tab. So I'm going to go to the Formula tab, and here I have the option to say Trace Precedence. So trace precedence shows an arrow for all the cells that are leading into the cell that you're dealing with, and trace dependence, so let me just turn it on. So trace precedence is showing me that I've got A6 times E6 gives me my value of whatever. And if I trace dependence, I can see that that formula then feeds into my profit and loss. Okay. Now I can click on Evaluate Formula, and basically what the Evaluate Formula does is says there's my formula, A6 times F6. If I click on Step In, it'll say that A6 is the cell called A Taste of healthy is the heading. So I can immediately see that that's the problem. I can't use text in a formula. Step out, I could do step in again, and it says the second half of the formula, and I could click on evaluate. Okay, so basically that's all it is. Okay, I'm simply going to go back up here, fix my formula. I can turn off my arrows. Click here, change that back to the course fee. When you're working through on the grader, it's going to tell you to do in a trace steps and what have you. When it's done, make sure that you follow the very last step, which is to fix the formula. And if you're on a Mac, all you have to do is fix the formula, because you can't do the trace precedence and so on. Anyway, skill number 6 is something called the watch window. And what the watch window is good for is to be able to look at, okay, let me just change here. I'm going to go over here to my lookup folder to look out. I'm going to add a watch window. So on the formulas tab, here's the watch window here. When I click on it, and it's actually put it here, let me just put it back. The watch window should look like this for you. I can pick a particular cell. So let's say I'm going to pick Cape Mansberger. So I'm going to click this cell here, and I'm going to add it to the watch window. Okay. Now what a watch window allows you to do is to keep that window open when I go to another. So if I go back over here, there's my watch window. And as I said earlier, if you drag it up onto the formula bar up here, it'll create the watch window up here. Actually, I've kind of done this in reverse. So let me just go back to my watch window here. I'm going to close it. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to go to, where's Cape Mansberger? Well, we'll just pick this one here, benefits here. So there's the income, and there's my instructor fee, which is giving me my profit and loss, right? Okay, because the total income minus the instructor fee tells me my profit and loss. So what I want to do here is I'm going to add this to my watch window. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say add to watch. Okay, so there's my profit, $6,231. I'm going to go now to my lookup table, and I'm going to click on Ben Fitz, wherever he happens to be. There he is here. And I'm going to change this from 20 to 30. So when I change the value here, I can see what that's doing to my worksheet value on the other workbook. So what it allows me to do is to identify a cell that I want it. So now I'm not having to bounce back and forth. I don't have to click back over here and look at Ben Fitz to see what that change did. I can simply look up here in the watch window. So that's basically all the watch window does. Okay, so I'm going to turn that back to what it was. Well, I think it was, I'll just undo it. And that's it. Okay, so I can close the watch window. And again, on a Mac, that's not available, but you just have to follow the instruction. If it says change something and then change it back, just do what it tells you to do. Okay. Skill number 7. Skill number 7 causes everybody no end to grief. We're going to go back here to the data table. And you can see in the data table we have my total course fees, my total capacity, my total used, total available, my course income, my instructor fees, and my profit and loss. Now in this case they've actually got numbers in here, and that's simply because of the way they created the spreadsheet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fix these. I'm going to change this to actually be a 3D reference. Now we did 3D references way back in Manage Multiple Worksheets. What a 3D reference says is that rather than type in a number, because this course fee is actually the total. All right, let me just add totals here. All right, so there's my total course fees, $5,181. If I go here, there's $5,181. But the trouble with doing it the way that they've done it here is that if this number changed over here somehow, right? If that changed, I'm just going to turn on my freeze panes. So view, freeze panes, So if my class fee, so I've changed this number from 78 to, let's say it's going to be 68. Now my total is $5,171, but my data table still shows $5,181. All right. So what I really want to do here is I want to create a 3D reference. I want this cell A6 to point to this cell C76. To do that, all I have to do is hit the equal sign, go to my classes worksheet, point to the value, and hit enter. Okay, so now I have a 3D reference. So now you can see it now shows 5171. If I go back to classes and I change that back to 78, so it's back to 5181. I click on my data table, it's now back to 5181. Now basically I want all of these to be 3D references. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. Right, so there's capacity, used, available, income, instructor fee, and profit and loss. So I can simply go back to here and I can use my fill handle to drag it across, because remember what happens with the fill handle. This is classes C76, so if I drag it over here it's going to say classes D76 and E and F and G and H and I. Okay? So that's what a 3D reference is for. A 3D reference is where you're simply pointing to a cell that has a value in it, and you just have to click equals, point to the cell, and then hit enter. As soon as you hit enter, then it will enter that cell reference into my formula. Okay, so I also want to create a 3D reference here to this number, my investment. So basically what we want to look at here is what's my investment going to be worth in a certain number of years at a certain interest rate. Okay, so my initial investment is going to be my profit and loss. So I'm going to do another 3D reference. I'm going to say equals profit and loss. Okay. Okay. And then in B10, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to invest the money for 3 years. And my interest rate is going to be 4.5%. Okay. And my monthly payment, I'm going to put in, say, $1,200. So basically what we're saying here is I'm starting with an investment of my total profit and loss from all my school's courses. I'm going to invest it for 3 years at 4.5% at a monthly payment, and I'm going to add another $1,200 each and every month. So I want to calculate my future value. So I'm going to go formulas, financial, future value. So remember what future value does. So the interest rate, and again, this is an annual interest rate, but I'm actually contributing money monthly. So I've got to take my interest rate and I have to divide that by 12. My number of payments is going to be my number of years, but I'm making a contribution every month, so I'm going to have to multiply that by 12. My payment is the amount of money I'm paying in, $1,200. And my present value is how much I currently have, which is my $51,022. I have a negative number. I'm going to change it to a positive by going up here and adding a negative sign to the value. So there's my investment. So if I start with $51,000 over 3 years at 4.5% and adding another $1,200 every month, at the end of 3 years I'll have $104,000. Okay. So what a data table allows me to do, one second here. So what I'm going to do now is I want to take a look. So we used goal seek before to say, if I wanted to say I want this to be $200,000, I'm just going to do a quick goal seek as a review here. So I'll blow it away because it's not part of this particular course, but just as a quick review. I'm going to go back to data, what if analysis, goal seek, and if I wanted this number to be $200,000, how much would I have to put in every month? Okay, so I would have to put in $3,681.63 every month for that to be worth $200,000. Okay, so that's goal seek. Now what goal seek allows me to, what a data table allows me to do is to do a bunch of goal seeks. So I'm going to say, well, if I put in $1,200 a month, how much am I going to have? I put it $1,250, $1,300, $1,500, and so on. So the trick with a data table is you must have a reference to your formula in the very first, in the cell. So $1,200 a month is going to be worth $104,000. We've got it right here. Now understand, these don't have to match. It just happens to be that way. If this was $1,100, it would still show this value here. I forget what I did. So the trick to the data table is that so this is going to be my data table. And all a data table does is says, all right, at $1,200 a month, I'm going to have this value. At $1,250, what's it going to be? At 13, so I could have done this with GoalSeek. Well, couldn't really. I could go up here and change this number from 1,200 to 1,250, 13, and so on to see what the end result is. So I'm going to highlight the whole range. So this is a one variable data table, and I'm going to go to What If Analysis, Data Table, and it says which value is changing. So this is in a column, and the column contains that 1,200. So I'm going to say the column cell is pointing to 1,200. And I click OK, and it says, all right, if I did $1,250, I'd make 106. If I made 1,300, I'd make 108. 1,350, make 110, and so on and so forth. So again, this is the same as simply going up here and changing that to 1,250. Right, there's my 106, and so on. So all a data table allows you to do is to do a number of different calculations. I could have done exactly the same thing by simply going into 1,250, writing down the result. Go to 1,300, write down the result. A two variable data table, so don't screw you all up completely. So when you're creating a data table, the top left hand corner has to be a 3D reference to the formula. Okay, and then I could change in the column, I could change any of the three variables that I've got in the table. I could change, well, four. I could change the initial investment, the number of years, the interest rate, or the monthly payment. So I'm going to use the monthly payment here, which is what they've done. And I'm going to change this, 1,250. Highlight those two, drag it down. And then I'm going to do the interest rate across the top. And it could be any one that I want, but I'll go 3%, 3.5%. Okay, and then I'm going to select the whole range. And in What If Analysis, Data Table, and my row input, so this is my row, is pointing to the interest rate. My column input, so these are my column down here, is pointing to the monthly payment, and I click OK. And what the data table will do is say, all right, this formula with this interest rate and that monthly payment is going to return $100,000. This formula with that interest rate and that monthly payment is going to return that value. All right. I double check by saying 4.5%, which is what I have in my original formula. 4.5% for $1,200 is $104,000, which matches my formula. Okay. All right. So that's a two variable data table. And skill number 9 is create a custom table style. Skill number 10 is straightforward. So skill number 9. We're going to, I didn't do the loss worksheet. Okay. I don't need that. All right, I'm just going to do it on the classes worksheet here. All right, so I'm going to go to here. I'm going to clear my filters. What happened here? Why is it not letting me clear the filters here? All right, turn the filters on, and all right, I'll do it. There we go. Okay, so there's my cursor, my data. I'll turn the filters back off. So what I want to do is I want to create a table. So we've looked at tables before. Tables are, I can go to the Home tab, Format as Table, and what I have is I can apply a table style to my data. Now in this case that's not the right data, so I'm going to select the proper data. Right. So I could create a table out of that data. So what a table will do, okay, so what the table will do is it will add it'll add formatting. So it's not a really good example of the table, so let me just pick a different table style. There, that's a little easier to read. Okay, so what a table does is it converts the data to a table. So I know that I'm in a table because I have a new menu now called Table Tools. And within the Table Tools, I can name the table. We didn't worry about these. I can add a total row, which I'm going to review with you in a second. I can say I can have a header row. I can turn the headers off or on. Banded rows changes every second row to a different color. Banded columns turns every second column to a different color. Last column would bold the last column. First column will bold the first column. Banded rows, we're going to turn that back on. I'm going to go to total row. So what a total row does is adds a row at the bottom, and within the total row I can say I want to look at, let's say, the average of my instructor fees. I want to look at my total income. I want to look at my minimum available. I want to look at my max used, and so on. Okay, and of course it's got the total row in here. Oh, all right, let me just delete this row here. Okay, so there's my totals, and what have you, right? So you can do all this. I can put a count in here. Okay, so that's counting up the total number of classes that I have, and so on. So what a total allows me to do, if I was to add another column here, and I could say equals available plus capacity. I mean, it's bogus. I'm just throwing it in to show you what it's capable. So remember, this is calculated columns. So if I look at my formula, you can see the formula says equals available plus capacity. And if I hit enter, it automatically carries that formula down throughout the table. So those are the three things that a table gives you. When you have a table, it gives you formatting to make it stand out. It adds filters and sort across the top, the filter buttons, which we did without a table earlier on in this lesson. And it adds a total row so that you can add the thing about a total row is that the total row only shows the visible cells. So if you put a sum in there, and then I filter the data to reduce the number of rows that are visible, then the total will only show the cells that are visible. And so it's really a subtotal, but whatever. And it gives you calculated columns. So formulas are English language based on the headings on the column, and when you enter one, it automatically carries it down through the whole table. Okay. So I'm going to delete that column. I don't want it anymore. I was just throw there just to show you. All right. So what we want to be able to do is to create our own table style. Okay, and that's what skill number 9 is all about. So we're going to create a table style here. Let me just I'll do it on this table, on this data here. So I'm going to click on loss. So I'm going to select the range of data, and then I'm going to go to styles, or sorry, to tables. So format as table, and I'm going to click here on new table style. Now I'm going to give it a name, so I'm going to call it classes. And then I've got the ability to format each and every component of a table. So the whole table, I could click on the whole table here and I could say format, and I'm going to go to border and I'm going to put a inside border. So I'm going to say, well, here, let's just do it this way. So we're going to pick thick line and we're going to click on outline. So that's going to put a thick line around the outside of the whole border. And then I'm going to click the thin line and I'm going to click inside, which is going to put border lines on the inside. And I can change my color. Now understand that once I have to actually redo it to change the color, because I should have chosen the color before I selected the border. Okay, I'm going to go to fill and I'm going to change my fill color to, let's just pick this beige. So that's going to set, I'm going to click OK. So that means that the whole table, and this is what it's going to look like right now, it's going to have kind of purple lines on the inside, a black line around the outside, and it's going to change the whole color to gray. I'm going to go to header row, and I'm going to format that, and I'm going to pick a different fill color, so I'll make it a darker color here, and I'm going to go to font, and I'm going to change the font color to white, and let's say bold. So that's going to have my headers come up with a darker background color and white text and bolded. Then I can go to second stripe row, second row stripe. So that means that every second row is going to be a different color. So I'm going to go to format, I'm going to go to fill, and I'm going to make those white. Alright, so you're going to see every second row is going to show up in white. And I could do columns, first row stripe, which would be here. So all the difference here is second row stripe is going to be the second row is going to come up in that color. First row stripe would have been the first row, and then the third row, and so on. Last column, first column. Total row, I can change the format colors there. First header, cell style, and so on. But this is all good enough. So I'm going to click OK. But now I still have to apply that table style. So I'm going to go format as table, and I'm going to apply that table style. All right, so there you can see what the new table style looks like. And that's basically it. Okay. And the last step is just to convert the table to a range. One of the things, so this is a table. I know that it's a table because I've got the Table Tools tab up here at the top, the Design tab that belongs to Table Tools. If I click on a different tab, I can still see that's a table because it says Table Tools. There are certain things you cannot do on a table. One of the things that I can't do on a table is that I cannot do subtotals. If I click on the Data tab and look at the subtotal command, it's dimmed out. I can't do subtotals on a table. If I did want to do subtotals on the table, I would have to convert it back to a normal range. So I'm going to go back to Table Tools, and then there's a command here called Convert to Range. When I click on that, I'll get the prompt, do you want to convert the table to a normal range? So if I click OK, you'll notice that my filter buttons disappear, my Table Tools command, but the formats remain. So that's basically it. That's what Convert to Range is all about. Okay, so sorry I got a little bit disjointed in there, but hopefully rather than re-record the whole thing, I'm going to just give you this warts and all, and we'll talk to you later.